The world believed it knew Muhammad Ali long before it ever tried to understand him. They saw the champion framed by bright lights, surrounded by cameras and noise. His confidence felt limitless, his words sharp and unforgettable. To most people, that public image became the whole story. Few stopped to wonder what existed beneath it. Ali was introduced to the world as spectacle. His voice arrived before his punches, his predictions before his victories. He spoke with certainty that bordered on prophecy, and people listened because he made belief feel inevitable. That certainty became the version of him people expected at all times. Anything quieter was easy to overlook. The public version of Ali was built on movement. He moved faster than heavyweights were supposed to move. He talked faster than critics could respond. Motion became his signature, and stillness was something no one associated with him. The world learned to expect energy, not reflection. Crowds didn't come to see silence. They came for confidence, for bravado, for performance. Ali gave them exactly that, again and again. Over time, the applause trained people to see only what was presented on stage. The man behind the performance faded from view. To many, Ali felt invincible. His presence suggested certainty in a world filled with doubt. He spoke as if fear had never introduced itself to him. That impression made people comfortable labeling him fearless, even untouchable. But fearlessness is often misunderstood when confidence is loud. The world confused volume with completeness. Because Ali spoke so boldly, people assumed there was nothing left unsaid. Because he stood tall so often, they assumed he never bent. The idea that he might wrestle with questions privately did not fit the legend. Legends are easier to admire when they appear uncomplicated. Media reinforced that simplicity. Headlines captured his quotes, not his pauses. Interviews highlighted his humor, not his hesitation. Over time, repetition hardened this image into certainty. Ali became the man people thought they already understood. What the world knew was carefully shaped by moments meant to be seen. The ring, the press conference, the spotlight. These were controlled environments, where Ali could lead the narrative. Outside of them, the narrative became less clear and less interesting to those chasing spectacle. People often forget that public identity is a collaboration. Ali offered charisma, and the world amplified it. Together, they created a symbol larger than the man himself. Once that symbol existed, it became difficult to look past it. The man the world thought it knew was always certain of victory, certain of himself, certain of his place in history. That certainty was comforting to watch. It reassured people that greatness could be loud and unshaken. But certainty on display does not mean certainty within. The world rarely makes room for that distinction. When someone appears strong consistently, observers stop allowing them complexity. Strength becomes expectation instead of effort. Ali's confidence became a mask. People refused to see beyond, not because it was fake, but because it was effective. It commanded attention, respect, and fear. It also hid quieter emotions that did not translate well into headlines. There were moments when Ali played into that image deliberately. He understood performance better than most. He knew what the world wanted to see, and he gave it without hesitation. That skill became both his power and his prison. As years passed, the image hardened further. New generations inherited the legend without context. They learned the quotes, the fights, the bravado. They were taught who Ali was before asking who he might have been. The public story left little room for contradiction. If Ali was loud, he could not be thoughtful. If he was fearless, he could not be reflective. These false choices simplified a life that was anything but simple. What the world thought it knew was shaped by repetition. The same clips, the same phrases, the same moments replayed until they replaced curiosity with certainty. Familiarity made people stop looking deeper. Yet even legends live outside the moments chosen for them. Outside the ring, Ali was not performing. He was living, questioning, listening, and changing. Those moments rarely fit the narrative people expected. The idea that there could be another Ali unsettled the comfort of the legend. A quieter Ali challenged assumptions. A reflective Ali complicated admiration. It required effort to accept that greatness might look different when no one is watching. The man the world thought it knew existed in fragments. Real but incomplete. Powerful but partial. Those fragments told an impressive story but not a full one. something essential was missing. That missing part lived beyond applause. It lived in private decisions, silent moments, and unseen choices. It existed where performance ended and responsibility began. Few were invited to see it. This story begins by acknowledging that gap, not to diminish the legend, but to deepen it. Because understanding who Muhammad Ali was beyond the ring requires letting go of who we thought he had to be. Outside the ring, Muhammad Ali moved through the world without an audience guiding his steps. The gloves came off, and with them went the rules of performance. There were no rounds to win, no judges to convince, no crowd to energize him. What remained was a man navigating ordinary spaces with an extraordinary past. In those moments, fame became quieter and responsibility grew louder. When the noise faded, Ali was no longer reacting to opponents. He was responding to people. Strangers, children, elders, and those who expected nothing from him beyond presence. These interactions lacked the drama of a fight but carried a different kind of weight. They demanded patience instead of speed, listening instead of dominance. Ali's hands, once celebrated for power, were often extended in gentler ways. They shook hands without cameras. They held doors open. They rested on shoulders in moments of comfort. These gestures never made headlines, yet they revealed a side of him that competition never could. He learned that, without the structure of training and bouts, time felt different. Days were not measured by preparation and recovery. They unfolded with unexpected encounters and quiet decisions. This shift forced him to slow down in ways his career never allowed. There were moments when people approached him expecting the legend. They wanted the joke, the rhyme, the familiar confidence. Sometimes he gave it, other times he offered something else entirely, a smile, a nod, or silence. That choice belonged to him, not the audience. Away from the ring, Ali noticed how much energy performance required. Being on came with cost. He began to value moments when he didn't have to explain himself or live up to expectation. Privacy became a form of rest. The absence of competition revealed how much his identity had been shaped by opposition. Without an opponent, he had to define himself differently. That process was subtle and ongoing. It didn't announce itself, but it reshaped how he moved through life. He found that compassion required a different kind of strength. There was no applause for it, no scoreboard to confirm success. It asked for consistency rather than intensity. That challenge humbled him more than any fight ever had. Ali also encountered misunderstanding outside the ring. Without the context of boxing, people sometimes misread his silence or restraint. He learned that not every moment could be clarified. Some misunderstandings had to be carried without correction. The world beyond the ring demanded accountability without spectacle. Choices mattered even when no one was watching. Words carried weight even when they weren't quoted. That reality sharpened his awareness of impact. He discovered that generosity felt different without recognition. Giving quietly required letting go of validation. It asked him to trust his own values rather than public response. That trust was built slowly, decision by decision. Ulsan age made everyday tasks more deliberate. Simple actions took planning and patience. This physical change deepened his empathy for others, navigating limitation. He understood struggle not as weakness, but as shared experience. Ali began to see that leadership did not always mean standing in front. Sometimes it meant standing beside, sometimes it meant stepping back. That perspective changed how he approached influence. The absence of the ring also revealed unresolved questions. Without training schedules to fill the day, thoughts had more space. Reflection became unavoidable. He faced memories he had once outrun through motion. He realized that public praise had once shielded him from certain truths. Without it, he had to sit with himself more honestly. That honesty was uncomfortable at first, but it brought clarity. Outside the ring, Ali learned that dignity often goes unnoticed. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in consistency, restraint, and respect. These qualities didn't feel dramatic, but they felt right. He began to value relationships not defined by admiration. People who spoke to him as a man rather than a symbol offered something rare. Those connections grounded him in ways fame never could. The world beyond the ring taught him that presence mattered more than reputation. Being fully present in small moments carried more meaning than being celebrated from a distance. That realization shifted his priorities. He saw that greatness could exist without witnesses. That truth challenged everything he had been taught about success. It suggested that value did not depend on visibility. Outside the ring, Ali encountered a version of himself that required no defense. This version didn't need to win or impress. It simply needed to be attentive and responsible. Those quiet lessons accumulated over time. They didn't replace the legend, they expanded it. The man beyond the ring was not lesser than the fighter. He was fuller, shaped by experiences no crowd ever saw. Fame placed a weight Muhammad Ali that few could see from the outside. Applause sounded light, but expectation was heavy. Every appearance carried meaning. Every word carried consequence. Even when he stood still, the world leaned forward, waiting for him to perform. That pressure never truly left him. Public admiration came with constant interpretation. People read intention into his tone, posture, and silence. A smile was analyzed. A pause was questioned. The freedom to simply exist without explanation slowly disappeared. Ali learned that visibility can feel like confinement. He carried responsibility for more than himself. His choices were symbols to others, whether he intended them to be or not. That awareness followed him into private moments. It shaped how he spoke, how he listened, how he decided when to respond and when to stay quiet. The weight grew heavier as time passed. Youth had made endurance easy. Experience made it deliberate. He understood that maintaining a public image required energy that could not always be renewed. Rest became less about sleep and more about escape from expectation. Illness added another layer to the burden. Physical limitations demanded patience he had never practiced publicly. Tasks once effortless required intention. The body introduced boundaries that no amount of confidence could erase. Accepting those boundaries was its own challenge. With illness came reflection. Slowness created space for thought. Thought uncovered emotions long postponed. Ali found himself revisiting moments he once moved past quickly. Some memories brought pride. Others brought questions without immediate answers. He recognized how often strength had been defined externally: speed, power, presence. These were visible measures. What he now carried was invisible: endurance of uncertainty, acceptance of change, quiet perseverance. These qualities received little recognition, yet they demanded more effort. The weight was not only physical or emotional, it was historical. His past followed him everywhere. People met him through memory before meeting him in person. That gap between who he was and who he was remembered as required constant negotiation. Ali felt the pull between honoring the past and living in the present. Holding on to the legend felt safe, familiar. Letting go allowed growth, but invited misunderstanding. He learned that change often confuses those who prefer consistency. There were days when the burden felt isolating. Even surrounded by people, he felt alone and carrying expectations no one else could share. Explaining that weight felt unnecessary. Enduring it felt inevitable. He began to understand that silence could protect him, not as avoidance, but as preservation. Speaking less meant conserving energy. It meant choosing moments carefully. Silence allowed him to remain present without overextending himself. The pressure to inspire never disappeared. People still looked to him for guidance. Even when he felt uncertain, he learned that inspiration did not require certainty. It required honesty. Sometimes honesty meant admitting limits without apology. Ali's faith became a source of steadiness. It offered structure when external structures faded. It reframed suffering as part of a larger journey rather than a personal failure. This perspective did not remove the weight, but it made it meaningful. He noticed how easily the world romanticized struggle from a distance. Pain looked noble in stories. Living with it daily felt different. That contrast deepened his empathy for others carrying invisible burdens. The weight also taught him restraint. He learned when to engage and when to step back, when to give energy and when to protect it. These choices shaped his days more than any training schedule ever had. He realized that responsibility did not always mean action. Sometimes it meant presence. Sometimes it meant listening without fixing. Sometimes it meant allowing others to carry their own experiences without intervention. Ali's understanding of legacy shifted. It was no longer about being remembered loudly. It was about being remembered accurately. That meant accepting complexity rather than chasing admiration. He carried disappointment without bitterness. Not every effort was recognized. Not every intention was understood. He learned to release the need for validation and focus on alignment with his values. The weight forced him to confront impermanence. Strength faded, attention shifted. What remained was character. That realization simplified decisions that once felt complicated. He understood that carrying weight with grace mattered more than shedding it quickly. Endurance became a quiet form of leadership. Others watched how he bore difficulty, not just how he overcame opponents. Over time, the weight shaped him rather than breaking him. It slowed him, but it also refined him. The man who emerged carried less noise and more depth, and in that depth, Muhammad Ali found a form of strength the ring had never required. As time passed, Muhammad Ali began to understand that strength did not disappear when the noise faded. It simply changed its form. What once looked like dominance now appeared as restraint. What once demanded attention now invited reflection. This shift did not happen suddenly. It unfolded slowly, shaped by experience and necessity. Ali noticed that silence carried a different kind of authority. When he spoke less, people listened more closely. When he reacted calmly, situations softened around him. He realized that volume had once helped him lead, but calm now carried greater influence. This was a lesson no fight had ever taught him. There were moments when insults came his way, subtle or direct. In earlier years, he would have responded instantly, words sharp and unforgettable. Now he paused. He allowed the moment to breathe. That pause often changed the outcome more than any response could have. He learned that restraint unsettles people more than aggression. Anger gives opponents something to push against. Calm gives them nothing. By choosing restraint, Ali controlled the situation without asserting dominance. That quiet control felt powerful in a new way. Strength without applause required confidence, rooted internally rather than externally. Ali no longer needed affirmation to feel grounded. He trusted his values enough to let moments pass without performance. That trust created a steadiness that others could sense. He began to see that leadership often happens quietly. It appears in how one listens, how one waits, how one responds thoughtfully instead of reflexively. These actions rarely attract attention, yet they shape environments more deeply than spectacle ever could. Ali's patience grew alongside his understanding. He no longer rushed to fill silence or resolve tension immediately. He allowed conversations to unfold at their own pace. This patience created space for honesty, both in himself and in others. He recognized that not every challenge requires confrontation. Some require understanding. Some require distance. Some require nothing at all. Discernment became more important than reaction. Moments of humility followed naturally, not the kind that diminishes self-worth, but the kind that acknowledges shared humanity. Ali saw that everyone carries unseen struggles. Treating others gently became an act of strength, rather than concession. He noticed how respect followed restraint. People who once expected spectacle now adjusted their expectations. They approached him differently, spoke more thoughtfully, and listened more carefully. His presence alone set a tone. Ali understood that wisdom often expresses itself through what is withheld. Not every thought needs expression. Not every emotion needs display. Choosing what to hold back can be as meaningful as choosing what to offer. He also learned to forgive quietly, not through announcements or gestures, but through release. Letting go of resentment freed energy he could not afford to waste. This internal freedom mattered more than outward reconciliation. Strength without applause meant acting rightly even when misunderstood. Ali accepted that not everyone would interpret his silence correctly. Some mistook it for weakness. He allowed those misunderstandings to exist without correction. He found peace in consistency. Responding with dignity became habit rather than effort. Over time, restraint felt natural. It no longer required discipline. It reflected alignment with who he had become. Ali saw that maturity often involves narrowing focus. He cared less about proving points and more about preserving peace. This focus simplified decisions that once felt complex. He understood that stillness can be instructive. Others learned from watching how he handled moments of pressure without escalation. His example spoke quietly but clearly. Strength without applause also meant accepting invisibility. Many of his most meaningful actions went unnoticed. That anonymity did not trouble him. It affirmed that his motivations were sincere. Ali learned that the absence of reaction can de-escalate conflict faster than confrontation. Calm does not invite resistance, it invites reflection. This realization reshaped how he engaged with the world. He began to appreciate that dignity does not depend on outcome, whether respected or dismissed. His commitment to restraint remained intact. That consistency anchored his sense of self. Over time, these quiet choices accumulated into a deeper form of legacy, one built not on spectacle but on character. People remembered not only what he achieved, but how he carried himself. In learning to embody strength without applause, Muhammad Ali revealed a dimension of greatness few ever see, one where power is measured not by reaction, but by restraint. And in that quiet strength, his life beyond the ring found its clearest expression. When people speak of Muhammad Ali, they often return to familiar images of speed, defiance, and victory. Belts, knockouts, and quotes dominate the memory. Yet those markers only tell part of the story. The legacy that endured longest was shaped quietly, away from arenas and applause. It lived in moments that never asked to be remembered. Ali's greatest influence was not limited to what he conquered, but to what he chose not to do. He learned when to hold back words, when to soften reactions, and when to let moments pass without force. These choices rarely made headlines, but they shaped how people felt in his presence. That emotional imprint lasted longer than any title. In later years, people encountered a different kind of Ali, less explosive, more deliberate. His presence carried calm rather than command. Conversations slowed around him. Even silence felt intentional. This version surprised those expecting performance, yet it stayed with them longer. The legacy few ever heard was built from consistency rather than spectacle. Ali showed up with patience when speed was gone. He showed respect when power was no longer available. These qualities revealed a strength deeper than athleticism. They showed who he was when nothing needed to be proven. He understood that legacy is not something you announce. It forms through repeated choices over time. How you treat people when you are tired. How you respond when misunderstood. How you carry yourself when admiration fades. These moments accumulate quietly into meaning. Ali's influence reached people who never saw him fight. They knew him through stories of restraint, kindness, and dignity. These stories traveled softly, shared person to person. They did not rely on footage or statistics. They relied on experience. He learned that being remembered correctly mattered more than being remembered loudly. Accuracy required allowing complexity. It meant accepting that greatness includes doubt, reflection, and change. Ali no longer resisted that truth. He embodied it. In choosing calm over reaction, Ali offered a different definition of victory. Victory was no longer defeating an opponent. It was maintaining integrity under pressure. It was choosing understanding over ego. That definition resonated far beyond sports. People who met him later in life often spoke of how he listened. Not passively, but attentively. Listening made others feel seen rather than impressed. That effect carried weight. It reflected a man comfortable with himself. Ali's legacy also included acceptance. Acceptance of time. Acceptance of limitation. Acceptance that every role eventually ends. Rather than clinging to past versions of himself, he allowed change to shape him. That flexibility preserved his dignity. He showed that growth does not stop when strength fades. It simply moves inward. Reflection replaced reaction. Wisdom replaced speed. These shifts did not diminish him. They completed him. The story few ever heard was not dramatic. It did not unfold in a single moment. It developed slowly through habits of restraint and presence. That subtlety made it easy to overlook, but impossible to forget once noticed. Ali demonstrated that character reveals itself most clearly when there is no audience. Without applause, choices become honest. Without pressure to perform, intention becomes visible. That honesty defined his later years. He also showed that peace can coexist with legacy. One does not need to fight forever to remain significant. Letting go can be an act of leadership. Ali modeled that transition with grace. Those who studied his life closely recognized that the ring shaped him but did not contain him. His greatest lessons emerged after the fights ended. They were refined through experience rather than competition. Ali's quiet legacy influenced how people viewed strength itself. Strength became less about assertion and more about steadiness. Less about winning and more about being aligned. That reframing expanded his impact beyond sport. He taught that restraint is not weakness. It is choice. It requires awareness, discipline, and confidence. These qualities are harder to master than force. Ali mastered them when it mattered most. In moments of insult or misunderstanding, he showed that silence can speak clearly. Not every response needs to be immediate. Some responses are most powerful when delayed or withheld entirely. That wisdom surprised many. His life beyond the ring revealed that humility does not erase greatness, it deepens it. By stepping back, Ali allowed others to step forward. That generosity reflected true leadership. The legacy few ever heard lives in how people remember feeling around him. Calm, respected. Heard those impressions cannot be measured, yet they endure. They speak louder than trophies. When the noise faded and the lights dimmed, Muhammad Ali's greatest victory remained, not over opponents, but over ego and fear. That victory required no bell to signal its end. It continues quietly, carried forward by those who understand that true greatness often speaks in a softer voice,